And so 6.5 or 11:15 a.m., presentation of revised State Water Resources Control Board's information order regulations for the Clear Lake Watershed.
Yes, this is Marina. I am unable to start my video, it says, because the host has stopped it.
Well, host, I think we can fix that. Would you like just to proceed with the
Yeah, let's go
presentation?
ahead and just proceed. And if I'm able to turn on my video, at least for the end portion, that would be great. But you all can see my screen, is that correct?
We can.
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you so much, board, for having me today. My name is Marina Delajanis. I serve as the Deputy Director for the Lake County Water Resources Department. I am here to do a brief overview of the revised State Water Resources Control Board's information order regulations for the Clear Lake Watershed. Initially, this was to be presented this past Tuesday with the State Water Board preparing for adoption on the following Wednesday. So again, just want us to keep that in mind as I move forward with this presentation. All right, so for today's discussions points, I'm going to do a very brief overview of how we got here, an overview of the draft regulations. I'm going to highlight the public comments that were submitted by the Board of Directors of the Lake County Watershed Protection District. I'm going to highlight the revisions that were made on the draft regulations, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit about the December 6th hearing and then anticipated next steps. I would just like to note that I am not going to be doing any sort of interpretation or doing a deep dive into the regulations. As we discuss next steps, we will be having another item early January 2024 to do that deep dive. All right, so how we got here, I'm just going to skim through this. This isn't the first time that this item has been presented to the board, especially as it relates to the Clear Lake Hitch. But again, very briefly, so as we know, our tribal communities have put in a lot of effort and energy into making efforts for Clear Lake Hitch conservation and habitat protection, et cetera. And then just highlighting some items that went before legislative earlier in the year. So as we are very well familiar with, in March of 2023, the governor issued Executive Order N-5-23. And basically what this executive order did is it directed the State Water Resources Control Board and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to evaluate minimum in-stream flows and other actions needed to protect the hitch, also work with water users, local tribes, and other voluntary actions, and consider an emergency regulations to establish minimum in-stream flows to mitigate the effects on drought. The executive order also suspended the environmental review by state agencies required by the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, and Public Resource Code Division 13, where the governor has declared a state of emergency due to drought conditions. As we are also very familiar with, in early 2023, our board, the board staff began engaging with representatives from Coalition of Tribes, Lake County, state and federal agencies, the agricultural community, and other interested parties to better understand the problems facing the hitch, identify potential solutions, and encourage voluntary actions to protect the hitch in the near and long terms. So we, as you know, our county and then other agencies around the lake have worked very closely with the State Water Board during this entire process. Specifically, staff from the State Water Board asked water users to share data, participate in monitoring programs, and reduce water use in February through June of this past year. Staff also began collecting and evaluating existing data to identify how surface water diversions and groundwater extractions in the Clear Lake watershed were impacting creek flows. Board staff preliminary analysis indicated that groundwater pumping may be impacting creek flows, but additional data is still needed to understand the magnitude and timing of potential impacts. The emergency regulations would ultimately authorize the board to collect the data throughout information orders, as they highlighted throughout this entire process for these voluntary measures. You can also see the picture on the right is the Board of Supervisors, our local resolution outlining an emergency due to the Clear Lake Hitch. All right, so again, I'm not going to do a deep dive of the draft regulations. We had already previously done that when they were shared and released to the public. So the draft regulations were presented in September of 2023 with the State Water Resources Board holding 2 public workshops in October to answer any questions and receive comments on the draft regulations. In November of this past year, the State Water Resource Control Board released a revised draft emergency information order based off of comments they received during the public workshops and outlined the consideration of adoption to take place in December. Basically, the regulatory framework of the regulations allows the Deputy Director of the State Water Resource Control Board to issue orders for information related to water diversions, extraction, and use within the Clear Lake watershed. Recipients must report details such as well location, volume, and timing of diversions within specified deadlines, and non-compliance may result in civil liability. This draft regulations also outline compliance and enforcement required, water right holders and users to adhere to orders and conditions in the draft regulations, prioritizing the most stringent requirements in case of conflict. The State Water Board can obtain inspection warrants for assessments, and failure to comply incurs civil liability and infractions with potential fines. The regulations also apply to all water right permits, license, certificates, and registrations in the watershed. So during the public comment period, our Board of Directors of the Watershed Protection District did submit public comment by the deadline of October 31st. You can see here on this graph, I just have high-level aspects that our Board of Directors highlighted during the public comment period for the draft regulations. You can see we highlighted briefly our Lake County Watershed Protection District's responsibilities and designations, spatial and temporal data, communication and transparency, duplicative efforts, just outlining that we would really want to reduce that impact for duplicative efforts, as we know that there's a lot of water right requirements and reporting that are already necessary for water users. Third-party compliance programs, voluntary actions, and appreciation and collaboration. Based off of the comments that were received throughout the entire public comment period, not just from our Board of Directors, but other public comments that were received, there were very few modifications, but they did have more specifications as to what folks were asking for. Specifically, I have the revised regulations and parts of the regulations here. So specifically in section 1050, definitions, there was added definitions of deputy director, again, referring to the water board, diversion, extraction, and groundwater. And then they clarified the Clear Lake watershed. So now it refers to the collective areas within the following watersheds as defined by the National Watershed Boundary Dataset 12-digit hydrologic unit codes, specifically Thurston Lake, Coal Creek, Kelsey Creek, McGaw Slough, Frontal Clear Lake, Manning Creek, Adobe Creek, Rodman Slough, Lower Scotts Creek, Middle Scotts Creek, Upper Scotts Creek, South Fork Scotts, Salt Flat Creek, Middle Creek, West Fork Middle Creek, East Fork Middle Creek, Clover Creek, Burn Valley, and Schindler Creek. And then also a small modification made in section 1051 in the information order aspect, just specifically highlighting that, and I don't have the entire section here, but you can see extraction and use of water in the Clear Lake watershed relevant to the board's Clear Lake hitch protection efforts. So again, just specifying that this is relevant to the State Water Resource Control Board's objective and goal in protection of the Clear Lake hitch and their habitat. So again, the revised regulations did go before the State Water Resource Control Board on December 6th. It was approved unanimously, and basically the regulations will be rolling out in January of 2024. We did have a representative from the Board of Directors of the Watershed Protection District to provide a public comment, and I will let Supervisor Sabatier elaborate that at the end of this presentation if he so wishes. On that note, I am coordinating with the State Water Resource Control Board to come to the Board of Supervisors to provide an update on the actual implementation of the rollout of the the updated and adopted regulations in early of January 2024. And then I also have the link here at the bottom where if you missed the public meeting, there were a lot of public comments from tribal leaders and tribal representatives, also from the agricultural community as well. You can find that on the State Water Resource Control Board YouTube. And then you can also go on their Clear Lake Hitch website. They also have a listserv that you can you can submit to, and then they will send you routine updates of what the state specifically is doing as it relates to the Clear Lake hitch. So with that being said, that is all I have, and I will take any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I will follow up real quick before opening up for others to speak. That on December 6th, I was at the meeting, joined in via Zoom. Highlighted, there was some things that were stated by certain board members that, in my opinion, mimicked some of the things that we had asked for. For example, we asked for seasonal, maybe I'm saying the wrong words, but seasonal creeks to be looked at, not creeks that are more like flash flood creeks that just come and go within a matter of a week. Ephemeral creeks, I think is what they're called. I might not be saying the word correctly. So we offered that limitation. We did also offer no further than 750 feet away from the creeks rather than the blanket statement of the Clear Lake Watershed. So that was a limitation. And one of the board members mentioned to try to keep the scope not as small as possible, but to try to limit the scope if possible. And so I spoke about the limited potential for the scope, but understanding that you can't limit it to the point that the data is useless, that you have to have the data in order to be able to get to the right solution in the long run, or else those limitations are nothing but a hindrance. Also spoke about the fact that there's not really anything specific about what the information order will be specifically, nor what specific information they will be asking for or how it's going to be acquired. One of the board members said that that gave him pause. I imitated that comment and said it gives me pause as well, and then asked for being as transparent as possible with the Board of Supervisors with what those information orders will be, so that we can help with putting out that information to the public, working with the public so that they can understand what is being asked, so that it's not a letter that's solely received by those extracting water through the wells or those that are diverting water, but it can be received by us, and then we can help with the outreach to make sure that it's well understood what's being done. Spoke about the importance to our community to deal with the hitch and try to increase their population, and also the fact that if we find good solutions for the hitch, that has potential other solutions with some of the ailments of our lake that we're trying to deal with. For example, if our creeks have more continuity of running water to help with the hitch spawning season, that potentially that will help us ensure that there's enough water in our lake during a longer period of time, which helps with our drinking water and our public utility systems and so on and so forth, as well as the recreation aspect of our lake. I think that is a vague highlight of what I stated. If you guys have any questions, please do ask, but I want to open it up for other comments from board members.
I don't have any.
Yeah,
Supervisor Green?
thank you. I do agree this can be a confusing process. So what the board approved on Wednesday, excuse me, were the regulations under which the information order itself would be issued, and then what we're going to see in January will actually be the information order. And it is kind of hard to follow the bouncing ball. What do you think about these regulations for the information order when the first thing you see coming out of the state water boards is this kind of broad brush, basically the first step of a two-step process? First, you have to adopt the regulations justifying the creation of the information order, and that's what actually happened on Tuesday. And then somewhere in January, we could see what the actual information order says, which I hope will be more granular and more clear to those affected. But this is the process they follow, so we're just going to hang on there. You and I did speak briefly yesterday about your appearance before the board, and while I appreciate that your comments were offered in a helpful context and reflect for the most part what was written in our position letter, I'm just trying to think if I had shown up at a meeting and offered my own comments, how well that might have been received by this board. So I'll just leave it at that. There's been more than one occasion I've been asked to stay in my lane, and I thought that probably exceeded the guidance that was jointly approved by the board in the position letter that we sent. I would note as a positive that the state water boards didn't take a lot of our suggestions, but they did take some of them. They did do a modest reduction in the geographic scope, so the farthest eastern part of the county is no longer covered by this. They did present a map on that Tuesday. I don't see the map here today, but that's something. And they did add a paragraph or two to just really clarify that it has to be reasonable, that it has to be related to the Clear Lake hitch recovery. We're not just fishing for water information generally, and that the deputy director will consider the need for the information and the burden of producing it. So I don't think they're going to go too cray-cray just based on those statements. But again, we have not actually seen the information order yet. That's what we're expecting to see in January. So I think it was a good job with our original comment letter. Again, thank you for making the comments you did, notwithstanding my concerns about the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we open up for the public? Want to open it up for the public, for anyone to speak? Please.
Hello, board. My name is Angela DePalma Dow. I'm Invasive Species Program Coordinator in Water Resources. I work with Marina. Thank you, Marina. Great presentation. I just wanted to make it the public aware and the board aware there are opportunities for property owners to kind of help address some of the burden that might come down with this information order, not just for the information gathering portion, but if there are any practices that need to be implemented on properties that might improve, say, erosion, runoff, and passage for hitch. So this is a project right now we have with partners from USDA, the NRCS, and the Farm Bureau in Lake County. And this is part of a national water quality initiative program. We wrote the plan for it last year with a grant, and now we're in the implementation stage. So what this is it's specifically for private properties on ag and forest area. And private properties can, we have a survey, so we're right in the information gathering of who would be interested, who might benefit from this, or if people just don't know what it is and want more information, we encourage them to fill out the survey. It's like only a minute. And then a site visit can be scheduled with NRCS soil conservationists, Farm Bureau staff, some water resources staff. And what it does is helps align with practices or tools that can be partially funded that can help measure water, direct water flow, also practices that could prevent erosion, maybe fencing to keep livestock in, lots of things. I looked at the list today. It's like you can scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. Some things that can be included in this that there could be funding for and help for property owners in ag and forest that would help comply with the potential the water use information order. And I know this is kind of ahead because we're going to get the specific direction from the board in January about what they're going to be specifically asking for. But I just want this to be on the radar. So if any properties right now or any constituents come to you and they're concerned about, how do I afford this cost? Or how am I going to, look at my sprinklers and see how much water is being used? There is an opportunity locally that can be beneficial. And we're trying to get information now of who those people might be. So we can start scheduling visits. NRCS can start going out and getting that information and lining up for funding that can be as soon as July 1st. Some things that could be on this list would be groundwater testing, so any kind of meters, anything, they can get those partially funded. There's also what's called a structure for water control, which is pretty broad, but anything that conveys water, controls the direction, rate of flow, maintains desired water surface elevation, or measures water. All of that can be included in these tools that can be partially paid for by NRCS federal dollars, of which we now have access to. There is no ceiling on the funds that we can ask, and there's no timeline. So as long as the USDA NRCS service is around and there's funding, we are now applicable for those funds basically forever. There's other things that could particularly help for hitch project. So if somebody has a road near a stream and, the state comes out, CDFW, Fish and Wildlife is saying, oh, maybe that road has some runoff that's going in the stream that's impacting the hitch right there. There's potential for that roadway to get address to prevent some of that erosion. So some controls on the side of it, a little buffer, some vegetation, and those can be at least partially paid for by the NRCS with a site visit with their engineers. So I just wanted to make that opportunity well known, and hopefully within the next few months it'll be very well known. Everybody will know about it because we want to make sure that we're getting that information out there so there's resources that people understand they have access to. And if you guys have any questions about that, let me know. I have a bunch of flyers. Right now, we really just want people to fill out the survey so then we could schedule site visits and go out and actually help people with specific needs. If they're concerned about meeting the information order, there's tools that can help them. If they're concerned about having to reduce their water or change something in their landscape, there are resources within this program that can help. So the flyer has a QR code and the link. People can just click it, fill out some information, and then NRCS will be contacting them to schedule those site visits. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very important. That's been a question, not just from this group as well at one point or another, but from many others, just what is the cost associated with it, and to have that grant capability or that support is amazing. That makes it a whole lot easier. Thank you. Just wanted to check with you. Oh, no, we have somebody coming up.
Thank you, Greg Scott, Scotts Valley. On the presentation that was just presented, we have monitoring equipment at the flow at bridges in Scotts Valley Creek, and they're in ill repair, and we want to see them upgraded to where they're accurate. I was wondering, when she talked about money, is there money that you can coordinate with the folks that are responsible for each of those sites to help upgrade that monitoring flow equipment there that would help advance that so we can get that? Is that possibly available? And if I can talk to you later, maybe I can get an answer.
If you're talking about private monitoring infrastructure, that's what this program is for. This program is specifically for private properties of ag and forest. And by definition, agriculture is cropland, grassland, rangeland, pastureland, non-industrial private forest lands. Forest lands could just be 10% covered by trees that will be at least 13 feet tall at maturity. So it's a very small amount that could be forest land where this program can apply, but it's for private properties. I don't know if the gauges you're referring to are the USGS or DWR. They maintain them and they're accurate and they're getting readings. And if they're not, you can't access them, then call us or see us stairs third floor, we can address that.
They're reading, but they're broken.
It's
There's
state-
physical, structural things going on with them. They're hanging in there, but they're hanging in there, is I think.
Okay,
the point.
so-
They're coming off the bridge. So.
Let's go ahead and take a look at that outside of this conversation, but thank you for bringing that up so that we can make sure we do get the right readings. Deputy Director, just wanted to check in with you if there was anything else that you wanted to add that I may have missed from that meeting or anything other than that.
Nope. There was nothing else I'd like to add, but I do want to just appreciate Angela for bringing that opportunity forward. I know that is a big concern as it relates to potential impacts on private landowners.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Any other public comment before we come back to the board? Johanna, do we have anybody online?
No hands in Zoom.
All right, and this was just a presentation, no action to take. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for your continued contribution.
Thank you
Just
so
one
much. I
last
appreciate it.
comment on it. For those that are interested, they do post it on the State Water Board's Clear Lake Hitch site. There's a link to the video. So while the focus and the action taken was on the information order, there was some fascinating information on the latest population modeling and stuff like that. So I'm excited to hear that they'll be coming to us early next year to present on that. But there was some breaking news on that I think some people would find very interesting, as I did.
I would call it more theoretical news. And also, just to add to that, the video does have my comments on there in case that you're concerned about my comments, or ask CAO Parker. I gave her a copy of my comments so that it would be available.